Now, with that being said, does this seem like an easy fight for Deji? No. And the reason is, oops, all right, so the call-outs are happening. We got Temper calling out literally everybody. Kenny and Kay were going back and forth. And then we have Fousey calling out Deji. But now Fousey made like an official call-out. And then he posted a little clip of him training, which we're going to break down and get into. But I think this one's interesting because this is one of those things where you compare fighters and their opponents and you think one guy should win. I'm kind of interested to see what most people's initial thoughts are, because you have Fousey, who sparred Wasabi a couple years ago and dropped him, right? And then Wasabi beat Deji. Based off that, you may think, oh, this is going to be Fousey's fight, right? He should be the A side. But then your last memory of Fousey is him getting beat by Slim pretty handily, right? He got beat up bad in that fight. And if you look at the both of them on the mitts, Fousey compared to Deji looks a little cleaner. He got better defense, got better technique, so he looks like the more skilled boxer. You can kind of lean either way depending on what you remember and the way you look at it. First thing I want to do is break down Fousey's footage of him hitting the mitts, and this seems to be quite recent. All right, we're going to freeze frame a lot here. It wasn't a lot of footage, wasn't a lot of clips, but there were some telling things here. I know most people initially saw the lack of the pivot in the back foot when he threw his backhand, but let's just look at this. All right, so you notice how his elbow is starting to flare up, and he's turning his hand towards the pad to kind of point his knuckles at the target. What happens here is that most people are going to end up pushing with their cross instead of turning. You want to have as much rotation in your cross as you would in a hook. Power comes from torque and turning. So not every cross is like that. Sometimes you shoot out your cross like you are a jab. But essentially, you want a lot of rotation. And if you're pointing like this, you're going to point and you're going to push, and you're not going to get that twist of the hand. Like if you guys remember that clip from Jake Paul and it looked like it was a tell, that he was kind of clicking his hand this way. You're turning your hand this way. You look at Mike Tyson, guys who fight like this. When you rotate that punch, you rotate your fist over. It gives you that added torque. So if your hand's already turned, you're kind of pushing forward with that punch. So if we look at the next clip, you see him push forward with that. The hip's not fully rotated through, and see his back knee and his heel still facing inward towards his body instead of outward. We would like to see here that knee facing his other knee, right, turned out, his heel kicking out, in that right hip fully rotating through. This way his right shoulder can rotate all the way through. So you get this kind of awkward looking motion where he's kind of almost like stuck because his hip, it's right here. His right hip isn't pushing through because his knee is still, like, see this line's facing out. You would like that knee turning in, that heel kicking out, and then that hip rotating through, and then this would look a lot more natural. So if you look here again, what would help is that elbow placement. If you notice the push, like this one looked a little bit better, like it looks straighter, but we're at a different angle, but it does look a bit straighter, but like, oh, perfect right here. So you can see here, if you notice where his hand is, it's shooting out like this, so the elbow kicks out. Instead of keeping the elbow in tight and closer to you and keeping that shoulder relaxed so that when you rotate, it's more of a straight line. But you can tell here, again, his heel is inward here, the knee, and then the hip doesn't go much further than that. You see how the hip doesn't rotate through, and you get like this forward lean. This is a very common thing with new punchers and people who are new to boxing, where you tend to lean forward on your cross and you want to lean into it instead of rotating through it. Again, it's just one of those mechanics that he's got to work on. But this was probably the most glaring thing because it was a short clip and we're trying to make the most of this type of content. But it doesn't mean that he's not going to have power in all of his punches. It just means that cross, he's not getting the most out of that cross. He's not getting the most out of that power punch. Let's see if there's another one. Yeah, he asked for another one too. Same thing here. See how he's right here? Like, see how he's starting to be violent in his hips here, in his shoulder? This violence, he's pushing, and the violence needs to be in torque, like rotating, right? So you need to get more rotation there. If he can learn to get more rotation, he seems like he's a strong guy, right? He's athletic, he's fit, he works out. So I wouldn't be surprised that he can get a lot more pop on his punches if he would just rotate more instead of pushing, right? His torso. Let's see how the punch finishes. You see, and then this happens a lot too when we're doing that like 1, 2, 3 or that 2, 3. When you're throwing that hook, you kind of shortchange your cross because you're already thinking about that hook to rotate in. But let's look at the hook. Better rotation, but he's back to his natural stance. So now his hip is rotating all the way to the front for his hook. And his hand follows through. Not terrible, but you would want to see just more rotation with that backhand.
Nah, is that a...
So let's look at it in full speed.
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2 hook. Nah.
So you see there on that, especially the cross, that backhand, his heel just gets stuck behind him because he's pushing with that right hand instead of rotating through. Now, with that being said, does this seem like an easy fight for Deji? No. And the reason is, especially at this level, styles make fights. And this is at any level, but especially at this level, that sort of skill set is not as important. For me, guys are pretty similar in their fighting ability. It's going to be the style. If you look at KSI and Logan, KSI's style was necessary for him to beat Logan. If JJ had a completely different style of fighting, his skill set wouldn't have worked to overcome Logan's size, speed, and his skill, right? Mike Tyson, even though he was smaller than most of his opponents, and he wasn't like a big, heavy puncher in terms of like George Foreman, like those big guys who can just have big power punches and can put their weight behind their punches. He was fast and quick, and he would surprise you. Obviously really strong still. He was a heavyweight. But his style, the peekaboo style, is what benefited him the most. And when you think about the Fousey versus Slim fight, Slim's style was perfect for Fousey because Fousey was coming forward, really wasn't moving his head. He was smaller. Slim was not as heavy, but the taller, longer opponent. But he had a heavy jab, and he threw his backhand very well, like sharp 1-2. It wasn't very defensive jab, right, where you're just kind of pushing and leaning back. When you're someone who's just coming forward and not moving their head, you're going to run into that kind of punch. Now, the question is, does Deji have those kind of counters? Has he shown that he can have enough power in his counterpunching to keep someone off of him? Because I do think that Deji has all the tools and the ability to beat Fousey, but based off what I've seen, the style to me leans towards Fousey, even though he lacks some of that natural boxing ability. Perfect example. Let's look at the Alex Wasabi sparring between Fousey and Alex. The first round, all Wasabi, moving in and out, sticking and moving, throwing combinations, having variety. Fousey was moving at Alex's pace. Then he came out right away in the second round. And if you watch, there's a few little clips here. Let's pull it up. All right, so look here. Right away in the beginning of the next round, Fousey decides to not fight at Alex's pace. He said, I'm just going to, come forward with fast footwork and throw heavy punches. And I'm going to keep throwing heavy punches until I land it because I think I can bully you and I think I hit harder than you. So we're going to trade, but we're going to trade at my pace. And this is the very beginning of this round, even though he was getting torched in the first round. Forward, that right hand isn't terrible. That's a nice overhand right. If that lands right, that's pretty powerful. Yes, the distance wasn't right, but that is one of his better punches. That's from a couple years ago, and it looks a lot better than his right straight. So like hooking punches, especially that right overhand, isn't terrible at all. So he comes forward again, and he just throws it again. It lands off the shoulder of Alex, moves him, and you can tell right away here. He slaps another hook. Alex wants no part of this, but instead of Fousey just kind of recentering and kind of moving with him, you can see this guy's face like, okay, this dude's coming out. This guy right here too, he's kind of like, oh, okay, this is getting different. Alex feels it, but he's stepping right to him here. Now he's searching. A lot different than the first round. Alex wants no part of it. The intensity, right? Set up. And then we know, powerful shot. So again, even though the technique wasn't there, right? You look at the first round, got completely outclassed, completely outboxed. Second round, Fousey changed his style. His skill did not change, right? He changed his style. And as soon as he changed his style, that benefited him and was Alex's weakness. Boom. Within a matter of seconds, He's on the mat, right? And one reason I will say that I think this is a good fight for Deji is because even though Fousey presents those challenges, Fousey's defense is one of his weaknesses. His inability to move his head and notice and anticipate punches coming. So that's going to be something that Deji can take advantage of, right? Landed punches, effective hard punches. Fousey's not very elusive, so he's going to be available. So it's just a matter of Deji taking the opportunities and just letting his hands go. He's going to have to let his hands go. What does this all mean? What do you take from it? And who do you have winning in this one? Leave a like and subscribe. Oos!